Hey folks, my name is Jessica Mashkovich, and this is One Take with Jess, which is interesting because we're now on take two. I flubbed the intro. So I'm lying by saying it's One Take with Jess. It's Two Takes with Jess. My guest today is Karin-Jill Schneider. She is a I did it again. A college admissions consultant. I want to say counselor. You're not a counselor. You're a consultant. And it is a pleasure to have you here because we know that the landscape of college admissions has changed. You know, the elephant in the room is the COVID and, you know, the pandemic. So a lot of kids are shaking their heads, wondering, what do I do? How do I do it? How are colleges going to look at me? Just when I thought I nailed the college application process, everything changes. But you have been instrumental to so many people in the ordinary, trying to figure out the ordinary college admissions process, that now you're even extra handy when it comes to trying to navigate this terrain. So welcome to One Take with Jess, sometimes
Thank
two
you.
takes.
Thank you. Thank you. No, it's great to be here and to see you again.
Yes, very much. So the pandemic has changed the way that colleges are now accepting students, and we thought that the Common App would end up changing things, which it did. You know, the Common App is one application that kids fill out that then goes to any like multiple colleges all at the same time. And that itself changed a few things about college admissions. But, you know, we're here today to chat about how to navigate this terrain, you know, with the intricacies that have been handed to us. So
Yeah,
I'll
there's so much.
I
There's
know,
so
I know.
much.
We'll frame it. We'll frame it. We'll pare it down.
Yeah.
Like 11th grade student doing remote schooling right now, you know, maybe has met the teacher or the professor not a professor, the teacher in person, maybe hasn't. You know, how are they supposed to like cultivate those relationships that are hopefully going to get them recommendation letters for, you know, for their college submissions? It's interesting.
It is. It has changed so many things. I at this point I can say that just across the boards, what was even commonplace 2 years ago, a lot of things have just erased. I've spoken to a lot of parents that say, "Oh, this is my third child. Oh, I've been through it before, and we know what we're doing, and whatever have you." And I just want to say to them, this is not 2018. We're in 2021, and unfortunately, 2020 really did a number on the entire process. Even the colleges themselves were scrambling to say, how do we now review and analyze all the applications we're getting in? And it also puts into perspective certain things with international students. Different
Right.
competitions have changed as well because of the entire enrollment and what and how they're going to be, quantifying what they're going to be looking for. Many colleges have always said, we don't have quotas. We don't, go by that. We do the holistic approach and we look at everything here and there. And to some degree, that's true. However, the reality is at this point, there are numbers that do govern how they operate, and even more so now.
Right. You know what? I did that being said, and you mentioned the quotas word. I was talking to my son actually, and we were talking about the fact that this is something that was in place to make sure that there was a
Equity,
diverse representation of people.
absolutely.
Yet colleges aren't forthcoming with, you know, like, hey, here's the percentage of this, that, and the other in terms of are we meeting our mark? You know, they will give you the diversity makeup of the institution on
Yes.
some of the college websites like niche, whatever it's called.
Niche. Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but they won't necessarily say what their milestone was for that
Absolutely. A-
population. And in light of diversity and equity and inclusion, I wonder if that's going to be more on the forefront and,
It is.
you know, more forthcoming. Transparency is always a big issue. when it
No
comes
question.
to,
Even the larger universities, going out there at this point, we have the Ivy, even the Ivy Leagues that have just given a more vast description of saying we are inclusive, we're diverse, and using those catchphrases. Now they are actually, seeing that they may be held a little bit more accountable for, that mixture in population in just in line of, equity and fairness. And these are new, like I say, catchphrases, which you need, we heard about pandemic, that new word, or unprecedented, these words that came up in 2020. And these are going to be new words that are going to be spoken about on the college level as well. But to even go to your question on about students, and you said specifically 11th grader, it is even within the 11th grader, anybody who has a youngster, even that's going at this point, who's in 8th grade right now, even in 8th grade, looking ahead to 9th grade, 9th through 12th, 9th through 12th, but specifically 9th through 11th grade are the vital grades in order to build up what is needed for going in there. Where it used to be just maybe a few key points. Oh, well, my student is very involved in organizations, or my student is on a varsity team. The holistic approach is even more potent, because many of these schools are now going for certain test optional or test blind. And you know the difference between those two?
I do, but you know what? Let's explain it for everyone else, because it is tricky. And then there's a little bit of hybrid in there with certain universities
Yes.
as well when it comes to the wait list.
Again, absolutely, exactly. The test optional means that you have the choice whether or not to give the colleges on application your either SAT, ACT, or both scores. You're given the option. Test blind means that you can send them, but even if you send them, we're turning a blind eye to it. We're not going to even consider it as part of our evaluation equation. So this all came about, a lot of them came about in 2020, where the students were not able to sit for the tests in enough time. What the colleges are now finding is that they're extending it. Some colleges are extending it into the 2022 evaluation process, some into 2023 or 24, and some of them have gone permanently test optional or test blind due to their individual experiences during this year mock. So that's number one, is to be really, understand it, because if you opt to go test optional, it just doesn't mean that they're not going to count the score. There are other things that they look for that you have to provide for them that are there. They will require you to have, say, the most outstanding GPA, or you may have to compile a portfolio and submit. Some schools ask between 3 and 5 essays from an English class with A grades. Like I said, there are many specifics that go into it.
So while it sounds like it might be convenient to not provide it may actually strap on more requirements that they're going to look for from that. And I did read something that I'm just going to give a statistic here. Test optional should mean test preferred, because then
absolutely,
it does, add more things that they have to try and call from you in order to try and read you as a person and see your level of success that you may have in the future there. There was the University of Georgia, I believe, where there was a study that showed that the people who submitted test scores versus the people who didn't submit test scores, 49% were admitted of the, 49% of the ones that submitted were admitted, and 26% who didn't submit were admitted. So unfortunately, this is just one scenario and one set of statistics related to one university.
But you are quite accurate in painting that picture, because
you might be halving your chances of just denying them the opportunity to even see your score. So,
And well, and that's what I was going to say is that uh, it's the same thing as I've always told even my own children. When they say extra credit is optional, it's really a trick question. You know what I'm saying? The word optional, I always say, you go for it. If it's optional, you go for it. However, there are cases where there's a discrepancy between a youngster's GPA and their SAT or ACT score. So that if it's too much of a dichotomy, there's too much of that difference, then people think that, oh, I don't want to throw that in. But sometimes if you throw it in and explain why, and on the Common App, there is a section after the essay where they say, is there anything else that you would like us to review that is not already in your application? When I work with youngsters, that is, I call that my key area, to advise them to basically explain what it is that may not be reflected in the rest of that package, but it's an area for clarification, and that everybody should keep that in mind. It's a very, very useful area for that.
Now, do college admissions people read all the way through, or do they filter
Absolutely.
out top level based on GPA, SAT?
Okay.
How deep do they get into the
Okay.
application?
Okay. So from my experience, and I've been doing this many, many years, and I've consulted with a plethora of admissions counselors over the years, and I also speak, with them on a rotation basis from many different universities every 3 to 5 years to get what they are newly looking for, so to say. Um, and what I do find, it's based on the individual university and also the level of the university. So, for example, if you're talking, about Ivies, for example, they will screen the pool, so to say. They say that they, will look at it, oh, holistically or whatever. But there is a certain gauge that if they didn't get a certain score on an SAT or GPA together at that point, they're not going to then make it to, say, the next round in the evaluations. Then you have other schools, state schools. State schools tend to look at, again, the SAT or ACT and the GPA in conjunction with an essay. Believe it or not, they are the ones that sometimes will lean more into the qualification. However, if you wind up being well below the SAT 25% level or whatever have you, your chances are much more diminished at that point. It's not a realistic goal.
So at what point should you not submit your SAT score, ACT score, if there is a big difference between your GPA and your SAT score? What is a good threshold that people can sort of take with them?
That's an extremely complicated question, but I will be specific on it. In my opinion, it is where if the SAT or ACT score can enhance your package. And what I mean by that is if it's either equal to your GPA or above what the equitable mark would be for your GPA. However, there's also a situation, and I have advised, if you're below, extremely below, significantly different from your GPA and your SAT, but you have an extreme circumstance, an extreme story, and you're applying to schools that are taking that holistic view, it may even be beneficial sometimes when people will say, well, my junior year, I was, somebody was dealing with their own chemotherapies or radiation, students that I've worked with, that they were going back and forth to CHOP or whatever, and it just didn't allow for that, but their classroom performance really showed that they're a dynamic student. It had nothing to do with them having any type of disability within the performance on the test. It was actual life circumstances. So that then gives you almost a segue to explain the situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a perfect segue into making contact with the admissions people of the university that you're hoping to go to, even prior to maybe even submitting the application or shortly after submitting the application, to show them that you have interest and to reach out as a person and maybe even uh, you know, lay the groundwork for even them receiving your application with the story at hand or the situation at hand. Um,
Yeah,
our
that's recommended, but in a certain patterning, because you don't want to overwhelm them, and there's a fine line between being assertive within yourself and then being annoying to them. It's a very, very fine line. There's actually like a time scale, believe it or not, that, like I said, the youngsters I work with, where we work it out into, okay, this month you're going to send this email. Next month you're going to do this touch theory and whatever else like that. Now, next month you're going to do the virtual tour. Next month you're going to do an in-person. There is a formula that they use. They give points. The colleges give points.
oh,
Yes, on how many times that somebody has, quote unquote, and you use the key word for me, shown interest. There is a level of dedication and there's a level of interest. Always, just go for random questions that you may have on your mind that you can't find on their website, because sometimes students will send a random question that is easily found on the website. That can work against you, because they'll say, well, you didn't even bother looking at the website, so why are you
right.
reaching out to me? You have to be very careful on how you word the contact. They do rate it.
Interesting. So, when you reach out and show interest, or you attend a virtual fair, college fair, what are some of the things that are at the top of the list, maybe given most credibility or credit, I should say?
So as far as the given the credit for it is again, right now it is the virtual, and it is some of the schools are going to in person as well. However, there are other schools. I mean, I have students I'm working with actually who are going this week, that are doing what they call now self-guided tours. They let the admissions office know that they will be going there. And sometimes they're granted, depending on the school, they're granted access to certain buildings that they can go and look into, and
Mm.
go around. NC State was one of them. I had students go to recently. University of Tennessee at Knoxville, and then coming up this week is University of Wisconsin, that where students have arranged to go and meet there, and they've connected with also students from whatever organizations that they themselves might be interested in, and
Okay.
they go on their websites and they say, hey, is anybody around that we might be able to socially distance from, but maybe that they can give us some in-person advice or direction.
Would they weigh in on the decision with whoever it is that you met with? Would they fill out a little card and put it in your admissions folder maybe and say
They
favorable
what they
relationship, we like her, him?
Well, sometimes, and again, it depends on who you're connecting with. The best way is to find somebody who is not only involved in whatever the organization is, but also that possibly knows somebody who has been in the past a college tour guide.
Mhm.
So, and there's a combination. So that combination does give credence and give importance to this current student being there. Another thing is alumni. There are certain schools that really, really are very heavy on input from from their universities. Again, specifically, I'm just saying places, I'm just saying like Syracuse or Duke. I'm just saying, even Wisconsin, and then these are, both public and private schools that, I'm mentioning, that they do take input from the actual, alumni associations and things like that. So you can even connect with them and
Mhm.
see, hey, is there anybody who might be able to Give me even ask for informal interviews, so to say. Especially another thing is that many colleges are saying we don't grant interviews. We don't want anything to do with it. And there are some colleges that are very steadfast on it. But knowing the difference between the colleges that will give you a formal interview, an informal interview, and don't annoy me. We just want to look at your package.
How do we know? How can we know?
It's very challenge. It's very challenging. Like I said, to know this is like I said, I literally spend my time trying to assess
Yeah.
all of these different things because again, the way that you don't have second chances within this process, unfortunately, and what you present to them it's very important to know what they're looking for. And a key point that I wanted, the people who are listening to understand also is that the essay, I'm throwing this in because the essay, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of the essay. And it doesn't just have to be about, oh, well, this is how wonderful I was and this and that and whatever have you. The positive point of a Common App and even a coalition. Remember, there's Common App you mentioned, and there's coalition. Coalition is a separate, grouping of schools that join together and band together that have a separate application process, different than Common App. But with that being said, the great part of it is you put in the information and you can push buttons for all these different colleges and universities and just pay their admissions fees and you're done. However, what I've seen is that students will write an essay without consideration to the 8 or 10 or whatever schools that they're applying to on that Common App, and they're not covering everything in the essay that would be appealing for each school.
Is it one
That's
question? Is it one main question that they're answering? How would
you get
they find
okay.
nuance in the
Okay,
schools?
so the essay question on the Common App, they've raised the number to 7 choices. You have 7 choices in the essays. And it used to be 5, but they broadened it. There are also essays in there that are more common in the sense that more students tend to pick them percentage wise. It just happens to be. Some people coin it as, oh, they're the easier ones to answer, so to say. But it winds up that the admissions counselors actually look at those who are more willing to take risks. That is a key point. They want to see people who will not just go for the easy way out. They want to see people who will expand it or be more imaginative or take the risk of selling themselves on a level that will have, say, the intellectual backing, but also tell them who you are on a social level. What colleges are now recognizing across the boards, and that I absolutely go by this, you really need to find a school that matches the students' needs, interests, and abilities. You may think that the name of the school and your student may have the GPA to get into the school, but if they are not a social fit, if for whatever reason the campus life that exists there is not going to fit them, it's going to be problematic. They're not going to be as successful as being with a peer group on an academic level that also complements the social prowess.
Yikes. I do have to say yikes because that to me is admissions trying to shape the narrative of the school and how we want to present ourselves, whether it's a liberal school or a conservative school or a religious school. And it's almost as if you'll have no shot because, if you expose yourself, which kids are very, nowadays, everyone is very vocal, very expressive of how they feel. And I'm so afraid of, I'm not too afraid, but it's out there that the country's divided. You know, we've never been as divided as we are now, politically, socially, and whomever is reading the essay may have their own views, and you try and be as impartial as possible in that role, I'm
Yes.
sure. But when you start reading an essay where you're reading someone else's view of a situation, and it might be so contrary to how you believe or feel, I can't help think that that's going to, you know, ruin the person's chances. Does everything have to be sanitized before it's submitted, so as not to come in conflict with the emotions or feelings of the admissions person? It's really
I
a
can give you,
tricky
I'm, I'm,
place.
I'm so in tune with you with this. And I can, without mentioning names of schools, because I'm not comfortable doing so, but I have recently come up against an exact situation that I want to share with, you know, you and whoever's listening, where student I was working with, the father actually, and again, you know, I'm not using names of universities, people, whatever, confidential in my world, but the father was insistent of wanted to have this youngster apply to a certain, but known beyond extremely, and you use the word liberal. It's beyond liberal. It's liberal is one thing. This university is known to be extremely off the charts, but the father wanted that name, you know, whatever. And the
So it's
father said,
Berkeley. Go on. I'm sure it's Berkeley. But go on.
we digress. But anyway, now, so the father insisted, why are you advising him not to apply there? I don't understand. And and a lot of what I do, like I said, I assess what the needs, interests, and abilities are of the student, but I take into the social component as well of where they would feel comfortable on a campus and what would be acceptable, not acceptable, whatever have you. I said, the GPA and SAT scores and ACT scores would absolutely, you know, toe the line, so to say. And I said, my gut is that he would not be a fit for that school. There's a social component. I don't understand. This doesn't make sense. That you're wrong. Okay. I said, well, and that's fine. I mean, you know, your opinion, I gave the facts of why I felt this in this way. Just to cut to the chase. So the father says, I'm going to have him apply there anyway, whatever have you. The student got into higher level schools than that school that I had recommended, even higher levels, but shocker of all shockers, he wasn't even waitlisted. He was denied.
Mm-hmm.
And the father was in such shock. And I said, schools do not just look at solely that SAT, ACT, GPA. At this point, they also look at people in a social aspect, and they say, we don't, and the words were, we don't always choose youngsters who are high performers if we don't feel, and the key word now is that we're going to be an adequate fit for our campus.
Yeah, that word feel and them deciding that based on their feel is, I mean, it's kind of like a weird sense of eugenics. It's like shaping.
There's no template. It used to be there used to be like a rubric. And in some schools,
Yeah.
and don't get me wrong, there are some schools that still use a template and rubric. There's no question. But what has evolved over the last, 30 years, I'm telling you, it went from going into a very firm area of, you got this GPA, you got this SAT or ACT score, you have great recommendations, we like your essay, boom. It is absolutely not at all. As a quote, and from an Ivy League school once said, everyone who applies here, this is an admissions counselor, everyone who applies here has a 1600 SAT and has a 5.2 GPA. How do we then, decide which, 500 kids we're going to take?
Yeah.
So That's a given. The grade, and that we don't even look at that. That gets you in the door for us to look at you.
Yeah.
But what are the other measurements? The other measurements for today, and this is what I really feel that we need to go into, is what makes your youngster different? Because there are plenty of brilliant students out there. There are plenty of students. Also, let me take the converse. There are a lot of students that do have learning disabilities and struggle and may not have the awareness, to the levels of, of what it is to be in all honors classes and APs and things like that. There are definite, I mean, schools that are there that can be supportive and have great programs and have good names as well. So again, you have to throw certain rubrics and templates in the mind out of the window and look at it much more of what is it that makes me different and who I am, and the key words, what do I bring? What is it that I bring to your campus?
Hmm.
They're not interested in the old essay used to be about, and I want to go to the University of whatever because I've always wanted to, and I've been this fan for years, and I know that the program you have in this school will be enhancing my experience, that I can go into the business world and do this and this. They're not interested as much in what they're going to do for you. They're interested in what you can do as being a part of the student body in their collective community.
Hmm.
That is much more.
Are they looking for you to have decided that you want to go into forensic biology, or are they looking for you to be, open to other things?
So to answer that, and I've advised many parent and student that sometimes to get into a better fit school for the youngster, I've even advised them to go in undecided. Let them see that they want to use the college experience to then narrow down what it is that is truly their passion.
Hmm.
They can have a passion, they can have an inclination, they can be doing the classes and the whatever extracurricular that may seem like they're pigeonholing, so to
Hmm.
say. However, you increase your chances sometimes of the acceptance when you go undecided, because think of it. When you go decided into, and say, forensic biology, I'm saying, say you want to go into forensic science, and I'm just going to throw this out at you, University of New Haven, which, has a forensic science, major, whatever, they can only accept into that major a certain amount of students.
Hmm.
At that point, then if so you compare somebody like that, they're going, say, up against, I'm just saying, 300 applications for maybe 40 slots. If you go into the general pool, they're going to be accepting, say, 300 students out of maybe 700
Hmm.
applications. So there again, it depends. Everything is so based on the individual student and what you feel that your best way is. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's good advice. What can you do? You said things start as early as ninth grade nowadays in preparation for your college, packet, what you're going to end up handing over to say, am I worthy? Am I good enough to be at your school? And are you good enough for me? We also should be interviewing colleges as well to make sure that they're a
absolutely.
fit for us. But so what do people start with in ninth grade, or even before, actually?
Okay. So thank you for this. Is a very important question. So when students are in eighth grade, the first thing, because of the way even high schools today are, there are a lot of specialized programs even available in certain high schools. There's also a certain track that once you start in your ninth grade for your courses, there's a natural progression that happens. I've worked with students that will first like call me in the middle of their junior year, saying, okay, I'm now looking at colleges and come on board and whatever, and then I look at what their transcript says for their 9th and 10th grade, and they're not even on track, and they say they may want, say, sciences or engineering, and they're not even going to be able to get to calculus by the time that they go to 12th grade, because they did not pre-plan certain, course tracking. So like what I say is, to the students I meet with that are generally either in 8th or 9th grade, let's sit down and look at, you don't have to decide what you want to do. You don't have to decide what direction you want, but what classes do you feel, look at the classes of whatever you're going to pick or be in for 9th grade, and then let's take it and look at the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade patterning, because it is predisposed in a lot of
Yes.
ways. People don't realize it.
Yeah, I remember when my daughter was in 8th grade, she's been in the advanced math classes through middle school. And then when she hit high school, there was an opportunity to be like, do you want to take regular math or advanced math or AP? And we were like, just continue setting the bar high, because that'll continue.
Fabulous.
Because if you chose to take the regular math, not advanced in high school, 9th grade at that point, even though she took it 7th, 8th, 9th, 7th and 8th grade, the advanced math. If you decided, let me lighten my schedule, I don't know what high school is going to be, you've already now put yourself at a disadvantage, because you can't hop into AP math in subsequent years. So
You
that
are
was a
so on
great path.
target. That was an excellent decision. And I can tell you, I have come across, I've had discussions, I'll use the word discussions, with guidance counselors, with who have advised both in their 8th grade and the 9th grade, said, and they use the word, you don't want to pressure yourself in your transition year.
Yeah, no.
It's a transition year. So you can always have time to take your honors or APs and everything. It's better to get an A in a regular class than getting a B in the AP classes and whatever. I can tell you that's not always the best direction.
And
It's
why?
not.
Why?
Again, depends where the child is on a social level and on an academic level. If they're already in the mode, if they're already on that train, on the track, heading to that station, and they're used to the work level being heavier or more academically challenging and everything, you then take them out of that pace, you're almost like resetting it at a slower pace. So then when they have to jump back to it, say, oh, you did really well now. Oh, now you can go into the honors or the AP classes later on. They're like, whoa, this is a lot of work. This is wow. And it's almost like sticker shock. I have seen that happen. The flip side is, again, that not to push somebody past what their capability is. Absolutely not. However, I am a firm believer is you need to assess the potential of the youngster before making the decision. And I guess where I come into this is, and most college consultants like myself are either former guidance counselors or they were former teachers. A lot of them are educators and all of that. My background is a little bit different, and I look at it from a different angle. I'm actually a nationally certified school psychologist, and I look at it from the aspect of that. And I actually also was a teacher at one point, and I came out of the classroom. I take both aspects, both the academic and the psychological aspect, and I look at that coupled together. So I know it's a little bit of a different slant, but you need to have that if the youngster is going to be a fit, and also not develop anything of buyer's remorse, like, oh, I should have taken that in 9th grade. Look, I'm not going to be able to now apply to this in this college because I didn't have this many years of what they're looking for.
Exactly. And I think just in addition to all of those great things that you just said, I think that the kids, when they're younger, going back to 6th, 7th, 8th grade in middle school, they're a lot more malleable. They're a lot
Absolutely.
more able to, you think that they're immature, they can't sit still or anything like that. They're probably a lot less distracted at that age than they will be when the hormones start raging and the girls and boys start, commingling, intermingling, and social lives get more drama and intense and all that stuff that happens from
It's
like
like, you
ninth grade.
know,
It's yeah, but that happens from ninth grade on. So the better you can not push your kid, because that's so negative nowadays. It used to be like
no,
you were a
no,
dedicated
it's
parent,
about
but
I'm sorry, it's about encouragement.
sure,
It's about, and
the
it's about
earlier the better.
knowing it. Absolutely. Because children are conditioned. Okay. Now, yes, now the school psychologist part of me is
Yeah.
ready to jump in on what you said. And children are conditioned. They are also, we are all, even as adults, we're creatures of habit in certain
Absolutely.
ways.
Everything is a mind game. Everything,
Everything.
dieting, everything is a mind game. So
Absolutely.
when you start playing the game early, especially in the formative years, with younger kids and education in
Patterns are
middle school.
developed, excellence is learned in that way. It is definitely a learned behavior.
Hmm.
Okay. And what's acceptable. Again, it's not about cracking the whip and punishing if they're not achieving or whatever else have you. It's not about that. But it's knowing your child. That's the other thing. I value the input from parents that I work with. I value what they have to say, what their insights are, because they do know their children. And a lot of times, again, it's not a one size fits all. But if you can encourage your children to be the best they can be
Hmm.
within themselves, and again, I don't like the word push, but also encourage their own development, even past what they see
Hmm.
their capability of being. You will know when you're going past that point. At that point, you
Yeah.
pull back, but bring them to that level, because what happens in time when they become more independent, they will then have that same self-determination
Hmm.
to develop it. Inspiration comes from the external. Motivation comes from internal. You
Mm.
want your student, you want your ninth through 12th grader, when they're in those college prep years, you want them to have developed and continue to develop a self motivation. You don't want it to be where you're over them or hounding them or doing these things. You're going to be doing that anyway with them, picking up their laundry or them putting the things away in the drawers or whatever it may be.
True.
Okay. Or listening to them say, Ma, any of that. That's going to be the real, but that's not going to make a hill of bean difference when they're 25 years old and they're in their career and they're doing other things. This is an investment. This time is an investment in what they will also do and become self-motivated.
Yes. So
And
going
they will
back to
have interest.
Yes, definitely. And going back to the psychology side of things in what you're talking about, setting up in the early ages of, sixth, seventh, eighth grade, setting up good study habits, good household chore habits, because it teaches them responsibility and time
Routine.
management and routine. Exactly. It's never too late to parent properly. I always say that because even my son is
Absolutely.
20 years old and he's currently doing Penn State from the house still. He's going to go back next year. But I'm still a parent and
Yeah.
we currently meet every Sunday. I'm like, I got to check your grades because, there was a little bit of a pandemic off course that happened. And
Yes.
I'm like, you know what? I'm here for you to be your coach. There's a coach that shows up at the door to coach people on their physical fitness. It's called a trainer. There's Weight Watchers meetings, which provide accountability. So you meet with them. There's no reason that, a person can't or shouldn't have a coach that meets with them regarding their academics and making sure that you're still on routine and still doing well. So we've kind of started doing that a little bit more to enhance everyone. I'm in business, I'm an entrepreneur. There's business coaches all around that are willing
Excellent.
to meet with me once a week, twice a week to make sure I'm hitting my goals and staying on course and motivated. So I see a whole opportunity for regular ongoing,
No question.
meetings with an outside person. That's completely untapped business opportunity for someone who wants to get with, students on a regular basis.
Absolutely. And that is why I'm like I say, when I say the people I work with, when I, meet, the optimal, the most ideal, I'm just saying is, meeting once, just once during ninth grade to set up everything, then
Hmm.
meeting twice in 10th grade, once in the fall, once in the junior year. And then in the 11th grade, going into once a month to monitor it and I give assignments of what needs to be completed next time or whatever. And then summer into senior year, that's final crunch, because anyone I work with, I'm a very big believer in early action. Early action is one of 4 ways to apply to college. And I'll be clear, there are 4 ways. It's early decision, early action, rolling admissions, or regular decision. And if not everybody knows the difference, I'll just quickly say, early decision means that you apply to the college, and if you get in at that point in time, you're locked in. That's it. You cannot accept any other admissions, acceptances, or anything like that. I never really recommend early decision unless it's a youngster who has been pining since they're 4 years old to be in this school, and that is their ultimate dream, and they know everything and anything about it and whatever have you, because it locks you in. My favorite is early action. Early action is when you apply. Most early action deadlines are either November 1st, November 15th, December 1st, or December 15th. The beauty of it is because before the winter break, you generally have your acceptances that people do find out if they're accepted or not. And then if for any reason you're waitlisted or deferred, you can then, be able to apply to other schools later on. And rolling admissions means that you send in the application and they do it on a continual basis. Within 3 to 4 weeks, you'll have your decision back. And regular admission that's the deadline. And then they will, more so in March, that it's usually around March 1st. So, there were different things to think about at that point in time as well, of what will suit your student, best. But again, the general rule of thumb is doing early action. If you're accepted, that is when also most of the grants and scholarships are given out. Once they run out of the monies for the schools themselves, by the time regular decision comes around, their funds may be a little bit more compromised. So if you are looking for any grants or scholarships or negotiations on financial aid and things like that, that's another key point that I usually try to work with. So I
That's a
just
great
wanted to
tip.
make sure I got that in, because it's a very important.
Yeah, that's
piece.
absolutely a great tip. Is the criteria stricter, tougher during early decision, early action stages as opposed to rolling and regular admissions? Do they set the bar higher during those times?
What they do is that they will do either an acceptance, a rejection, or a deferment. So what they are looking for, the students that have exactly what they want at that point in time. But however, even if you feel that you're not totally on target for it, you still do it. I've had other students do it, because then at least they're then deferred and they're then put into the regular pool, but the name is still familiar to the school already.
Okay.
And it also shows that you're on top of your game. It also shows that you're anxious about getting into the college, the setting, the college setting,
Hmm.
so that you're planning ahead and you are actually doing the work to get there sooner than later.
Hmm.
It is, again, a psychological mindset for the student and also the admissions counselors.
Interesting.
They see them
So
as proactive.
yeah, my dog's scratching.
Oh,
When you're trying to go for a great college, but money is very important. You're hoping to get money from the school in order to go there. what's your threshold for that? Because what we were thinking about is that you need to kind of sacrifice a little bit so that you have the highest grades that you can for that university, and then they're going to want you there because it's a better showing for them to be admitting people with high scores. It ends up on the niche or the niche, whatever website, as looking like they are having a higher caliber of person. They're willing to pay you money to be there. They want your kind to actually be there. When I say your kind, I don't mean your ethnicity. Actually,
Right.
Nowadays it could mean all of that, actually. Any kind. They're just trying to bring you in so that it looks better on the numbers, on their numbers. How do you set your bar? Do you set your bar a little bit lower in order to increase your chances of getting more money?
Okay, so my rule of thumb is that you can't just go by GPA and SATs, like I told you in the beginning. The the best template is to have two schools that are extreme reaches, or that are reaches, that you know that that is above, that's above what you want, that what you need. You take 4 middle of the road, and then you take 2 that are you're within the 75th percentile, so to say.
Yeah, you'll get in.
And
It's like shooting fish in a barrel for that one.
exactly. However, and I'm going to now throw this into there, that I had a student who wanted the safety schools, that thought, I mean, it was definitely a safety. I mean, he was like in the 90th percentile, so you would think that it would be. He was rejected. He was rejected.
Why? Can you ask why, actually?
You're not supposed to. I'm going to be honest. You're really not supposed to, in that way. But the long and the short is, I'll just put it this way. I was looking for, certain answer. So very off the record, I did get an answer, very off the record, from this particular university. And they said that they were finding that a lot of students, it was a state school, and a lot of their finding that a lot of people were using it as a safety school. They knew that they weren't going to legitimately go there, and that they didn't want to give up spots for students that truly did fit their exact caliber in there. They weren't interested in expanding it to making it a higher level type of acceptance. At that point, they wanted to keep it within that range, and that they also felt as if it would not have been, as they put it, they felt it wasn't a good fit, that they would be bored within the first 6 months, and
Interesting.
that they wouldn't be challenged enough, and that they would be investing in them when they would want to transfer.
Okay, so it's one of those you're overqualified type things. But that's very presumptuous of the school to be saying, to be doing that,
I'm not,
because
I know. And the funny thing, and I've gone into situations like that. I have another situation like that, and we didn't appeal.
mm,
And I didn't appeal. And what we did with the appeal, and it was another state university, and the appeal was, we on it, that we don't understand why this was a rejection. However, we just want to be clear that in the last year, that the unemployment situation for the family made it more necessary for this youngster to go to a state school for these reasons. What happened was, they had filled out the FAFSA form before there was this extreme unemployment.
mm-hmm.
And we requalified it under that, the reason they were seeking it also, and one of the parents also was going through treatments.
Mm-hmm.
So that the student, one, wanted to be close to home
Mm-hmm.
if needed, and two, needed the financial consideration. We won the appeal.
Yeah, I mean,
I,
obviously those are all valid reasons.
I mean, and I, like I said, and I
Yeah.
advocate for these things and whatever, when we see it like this. They did not have the full picture. They just didn't.
All right. That's crazy. What is the importance of doing community service work and things that go beyond grades and beyond the essay, beyond standardized testing? What are some of the other things that really can make a difference?
Okay, this is again vital. Putting aside the GPA and SATs and everything like that, putting that aside, it's essential to have well-rounded and to have hitting certain what we call tick marks. Community service, absolutely. Involvement in school clubs, absolutely. Involvement possibly even in outside religious organizations, absolutely. Having a job, absolutely. You think about community service, and I will tell you one of the major things what they shy away from, and people think that, oh, I made a NHS and I have, whatever, 67 hours of community service, but they have like 2 hours at this service and 2 hours at that one, but they're not looking for 40 different community services. They would like to see consistency. They want to see it to be in that way a commitment. If you can remember nothing else, you want your profile to show that you are committed, that you have that consistency, because that then yields what your character is. I call it my 3 C's. So you put it in there as such, where you have, and that's why I say when we talk about 9th grade or 8th into 9th grade, you want to see that, okay, you are in the drama club. I'm just saying, great. I hope you enjoy it because, okay, you started in 9th grade. You right now, let's hope that to carry it through. You want to join the debate team. Okay, you don't have time now, but let's plan, say, in 10th grade. So then you have 10th, 11th, and 12th. You want to see more than just anything more than 2 years of just doing something club-wise. Anything more than just 2 hours or 3 hours at a clip, community service-wise. Steady. I've had students who I've said, okay, volunteer at CCD or in your Hebrew school or in any of those organizations or community organizations for whatever ethnic group or whatever it may be. Volunteer from 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th.
Yeah.
They see that there is a connection that you have to your own community, but also that you have, they translate that into also meaning that you're close with your family.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, that's interesting.
They
And
do.
how about taking a leadership role or demonstrating an innovative?
That's the next follow-up. So when you start, you see, you know it, yeah.
You and I are right here.
There you go. So what it does is it sets you up. So if you join an organization, like I said, in 9th grade, you're a participant, you're a member. By 10th grade, you may take another role that will be like a bridge between a true leadership, because true leadership roles really are more 11th and 12th grade, but you're setting yourself up for that climb. So you may be assisting in this, or you may be organizing. By 10th grade, you can have like organization as your leadership. By 11th grade, you can go into a vice president or treasurer, secretary, whatever role. And then by 12th grade, go into that presidency. Whatever it is, there is an uphill climb on that leadership. Leadership is vital. Why is leadership vital? Because if you've brought it to your home community, you've brought it to your school community, you will then bring it to your college community.
Yep, that makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. And
You
even
wanna see
starting a
progression.
club. I know that universities are always saying if, we have this club here, we have that club here, we have the hammock club. That was big out in UCLA when we did a UCLA tour. They're like, we have a hammock club where everyone just sits on the hammocks and does all this stuff. And if we don't have a club, you can create a club, so they're big on people even taking the step forward to create a club. So actually in high school, my son, Ben, if you recall, he created the volleyball club.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. And
Yes.
that was an initiative that was just beyond filling out a form. You had to recruit, a teacher to be the administrator or whatever of the club as a responsible person. You had to make sure you secure the gym time against other clubs. So it was certainly a role that he and this other kid, Matt, took on and an initiative that was great. The club still exists today. And I think that helped him, you know, with his.
Tremendously. And I remember when he did that, and I remember working with him doing, when he had that on his brag sheet, which was another thing to create, which, I advised to create from the 9th grade up. And that I had a student who did also initiate a club in the high school, and then went on actually to create one of the very first Quidditch clubs in college. Yes.
Is that from Harry Potter?
From Harry Potter.
Oh.
Yes. And what he did was, yes, they would literally compete in riding on brooms. I mean, it was very much mimicking what the Harry Potter makeup was of the Quidditch. And now, if you want to look, there are multiple universities that do have Quidditch clubs.
That's great.
It was very, very broad, but absolutely creation of a club. And you also, if your student is not an athlete, they look for scholar athletes. I'm being honest. That's another thing. They do like scholar athletes. So if they're not on a varsity team or anything like that, but at least when you apply for colleges, show some interest in some way in an activity. What a lot of times, ultimate frisbee, believe it or not, that is a sport.
Yep, or fencing. Fencing is always.
I have a student right now. I have a student who's a senior right now, and she does fencing. And they actually, we asked for an interview in one of the schools that she applied to. And I said to her, emphasize the fencing with it. And then she gave me feedback afterwards, and she said they were fascinated with the fencing. They were absolutely fascinated, and said, would I start a club if I was in their school?
Oh, that's a good way to
They asked on the interview. So you mentioned a good one. I'm saying within there. I also have another student, and let me throw this in because I want people to know. Language. I will tell you, they are very much done with the theory or the question, what do you call somebody who is, at this point, monolinguistic, American. They want now American youngsters to have solid language skills in multiple languages. Bilingual and trilingual are no longer optional.
Interesting.
Talk about this.
What about Latin? How is Latin perceived as anything that's?
So again, it's not, because it's not a conversational language. It helps if you're going into the sciences. If you're going into the sciences, Latin is wonderful, because you do have at that point, again, a higher mode of language comparisons to the scientific terminology and things like that. They do look at that. However, I'm going to give another example. I have somebody I'm working with right now who's a sophomore, and he was resistant to doing anything other than he's taking in high school German in his high school, and he'll go along with that. But I wanted him to have, because of his trajectory, of another language. So I had him even start on Duolingo with Japanese, and because of just to do this. And at first he was grumbling, whatever. Let me put it this way. That was 6.5 months ago. During pandemic, he now does one-on-one tutoring with a tutor who is tutoring him in Japanese, and in 10th grade, the tutor says he's about 35% proficient already.
Wow.
Yes.
I was thinking, because it's all characters, and it's, it's that's a real chunk, a bite to take out of a new language when it's.
Yes, but he developed such an interest in it.
Yeah. Sorry.
No worries.
Those are my guard dogs. Okay.
I love the puppies there. Yeah. So it's also about, and like I said, that's where the psychologist in me comes in. It's finding what could be appealing to the youngster and not force feeding them. I don't believe in force feeding them, but I do believe in coming up with creative suggestions that will enhance their chances.
Okay.
in being much more like that.
Yeah. So languages, if you could take it, it looks very good. It's almost a criteria for them.
Absolutely.
Um, what about, and we're going full circle here on the diversity, equity, and inclusion side of things. What check marks on the application should you be putting, or could you be putting? Should you find out your ethnic background when you never even knew you had one? Like what can help increase your chances when it comes to the quota side of things that colleges won't admit, and the diversity inclusion? How can you, because everyone's trying to leverage whatever you can in order to get into the university of your choice. um, how can you leverage that aspect of the application?
Okay, so about 2 years ago, actually, I actually did start. Made suggestions to some people who asked me the similar questions, and if they were agreeable to it, and if they didn't feel it was going to be too much turmoil within their own family situations and upheavals, I did suggest, and I said you can think about doing an ancestry DNA or a 23andMe
Mm-hmm.
and see what things come up. I actually, in dealing with it in the last 2 years, I actually had a student who came up on it as 12% Native American and
Okay.
had absolutely zero clue. When it was actually determined more, it wound up they actually were able then, how interesting it was, and they are from the state of New Jersey, that they have background in the Lenni Lenape tribe, which is actually was based in the region, and it turned into an entire interesting scenario.
Wow. And
So,
does that get you the ability to check off Native
okay,
American
so
or
I
other?
learned a
Because
lot with that.
there's a
Interesting enough.
percentage.
So there then becomes a different element with Native American, which is where they then have to backtrack it to which generation has, I forget the exact percentage, but there was a higher percentage other than 12. But if that, for example, I think it was tracked back to a grandfather. But if the grandfather who was still alive applied to the nation for inclusion or whatever else and proved his DNA or whatever it was, the descendants of the person who then gets accepted by the grouping, I think it goes down to like 2 generations. I don't quote me exactly, but I remember that was part of what could be done.
Okay. And then do you receive money? Do you receive a grant
It's
for
consider
American Indians that have been set aside,
there's
or Native Indians?
considerations. There
I
are
think it's called
considerations.
indigenous now.
Yes, indigenous. That's indigenous, exactly. But they there are different things from the the different involvements and the different tribes themselves that they do provide, but it's more about the colleges themselves of the recognition and what percentages they're looking for in that, and I don't like to use the word quota, but
Yeah.
they look for that inclusion and diversity within it. So
Yeah.
would it put chances on an increased level?
Yeah. I don't know why everyone is still so scared to use quota. You have large companies that are talking about making their boards more diverse, and they
Right.
quote a certain percentage of, diversity that they want on their board of directors and everything. I wish the whole transparency would really be a little bit more transparent.
Parent, I am fully in agreement with that, because it's again, as you said, and you started this off, the elephant in the room. Well, there are too many elephants in the room, and it
Yes.
seems like
Very overcrowded room.
it is, exactly. And after a while, you can't breathe. You can't even reach the
Yes.
window to lift it up.
Yes.
If things were more transparent, to use your word, which is very, very on target, to use that, everyone would know where they stood. Everyone would know how it wouldn't be a game. And it's a very sad commentary that it
Yeah.
now that there are certain groups that are now going to become disadvantaged.
Yes.
So you then have to look at what then will put them at an equal playing field. For
Right.
years, there's been battle cries that say that, oh, particular group had all the advantages and everything else like that. Well, in some instances, it's not moving it to being more equitable. It's actually tilting the scale in the opposite direction. So it's really a very, very tenuous situation
Right.
here.
And to be fair, it's not always been a white, black, Spanish, Asian type of thing. There's plenty of universities where there's a very large population of Asian students or Indian students, and the quotas need to almost be there to let the other ethnicities in, just because the
balance.
grades are extremely high for so many of that ethnicity. So it's not always
Exactly.
that it's not always a white black thing or anything. It's a
No,
variety of different things that could be
absolutely,
weighing in for
absolutely.
sure.
I always say it's a plethora of intruding aspects of it, because again, it's not as concrete as they say. It's not as black and white as black and
Right.
white. It's not.
Right. So now, the whole college admissions process has been so many things had gone into it, but now it almost is like there's now double the amount of variables.
Considerations. Yes, and considerations.
Many of which are subjective in nature at this point. So you're being left in the hands of the people who have their own impressions that they're coming to the table with. And I just hope that everyone's using their best judgment. The things that used to be objective, like the test scores and all of that, are coming into question. So it gives that less, credibility when it comes to trying to even have the objective side of things measure a student. So a lot of things are becoming very variable, very subjective, where you're now taking out almost all of the objective components on how to measure, if someone is going to be here. And then layered on top of that, you have the agendas of the universities, you have the social climate of the university, you have teachers that are also being suppressed in what they could actually add to the curriculum in terms of, their approach. There was a story about a professor, I think it was at Yale, who had he had traveled to this particular nation that he was teaching about, and this one student had taken the class because he heard that this professor would always tell stories from his experiences and stuff. And at the end of the semester, the student was like, when are we going to get to the time when you had lived these types of things? And he's like, I'm not allowed to. I was basically slapped on the hand because one student had complained. And this teacher now had to, I used the word before, but sanitize their curriculum or what he was teaching because, that level wasn't allowed anymore. And it was only sticking to the agenda of what the university is wanting to put out there. And it's kind of sad, but I guess it's kind of good in that way too, because teachers are putting forth their own political views sometimes, or their own social views, and maybe those should be, kept to themselves.
But they're not. It is a very, from what I'm seeing, and like I said, I visit the colleges, I speak with the admissions counselors, I try to keep my knowledge on the pulse of what is happening minute to minute, and they do change. But what the reality is it's unfortunate, but I've seen where if there's a certain slant on things, it's acceptable. You can't stifle. No, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, all of that goes, as long as that there's the narrative that the colleges are okay with, as you were saying. And then if you have a different perspective or whatever, you can be asked to change colleges.
Yes.
And I know
true.
It had been done in the UCal system. I do know of a professor who was at one university for, I think he was there 16 years. And the university actually shift their perspective in certain ways. And so his way of teaching, or as you say, stories of sharing, which were, at that point, he was lauded for it. This was, great and whatever. over the 16-year period of time got to a point where it has to be changed now and whatever, or maybe you should go to a different university within our system. And he stayed another year and then said, I'll take that transfer now.
Yeah. Yeah. It becomes very uncomfortable, even for the students. Like you said, you really need to make sure that you're picking the right college for yourself, because it's not, for as much free speech as we want to say out there, it's only free until someone decides that you shouldn't be speaking. And that cancel culture is really, really strong and can completely shut people down. So
And you don't want your student, and this is a reality part of it. That's why I was very strong with that. Like I said, wasn't rude in any way, but I was trying to get across to that father that the culture of the campus, you don't want your son sitting in his dorm room being ostracized or rejected by others if he has a certain perspective. There are college campuses where he would be included and feeling comfort level and whatever, and it's not a bad or a good thing. It's just who the student is and peer groups. And it's great to have diverse conversations, and you don't want to just pigeonhole yourself into where everybody's the same. Heterogeneous is great, but in some situations, in some colleges, they've made it homogenous. They've made it where unless you have this viewpoint, you better shut your blinds.
right.
You can't look out that window.
And is that crazy? Like, you've been in the system for a long time, not because of your age or anything, but just because that no,
It is because of my age, but it's okay.
that's been your focus and concentration. Have you ever, are these unprecedented times in this sort of situation? Because I'm sure that things happened during the 60s and the 70s, and, everyone had a voice and they were burning their bras and they were
Yes.
protesting for this. So there have been upheavals similar to this, but has it gotten worse?
It has changed.
How?
And I will tell you, from my perspective, even back in days when I was in college, there were uprisings, there were sit-ins, there were protests, there were all of those things. But yet, one of the main component was we felt that there was a voice. It didn't get to the degree of violence that it gets to. Today there were marches and things like that. Yes, there were clashes. There was no question, which sometimes did become more violent, but you weren't excluded. You sooner had the shouting match, one above the other. You sooner exchanged the ideas, and the ideas were valued. You didn't have to agree. I always said I grew up more like we agreed to disagree.
Mm-hmm.
I find I'd say maybe 5 to 8 years, the whole culture of agreeing to disagree and moving on is gone.
Yeah, I think it's been replaced with, if you're not with us, you're against us, which
Exactly.
is really too much of a presumptive statement. I just might be neutral. It may not be completely relevant to me to pick sides. So there
Exactly.
should be no, if you're not with us, you're against us. But unfortunately, you're made out to be the enemy when you're just like, what?
You're forced also to take a side, which
Yeah.
is never, I mean, and there shouldn't be sides to take, because each point is individual. Each perspective, I may think one way on one issue, but I may think another way on another issue, and they'll say, well, you can't think a different way on that issue because you're all the way to this side or all the way to that side. No. What's been lost, there are two main things I feel: being moderate, being in the middle, being either being Switzerland or taking the good components from each side. I feel in the last number of years there's been too much need to convince and not to convey.
Hmm.
Convey your information, convey where you feel the facts are coming from, communicate.
Right.
That's not what it's about.
I
People
think
want
you
to
have more
convince
C's.
you.
You have more C's to add to your collection of
Oh,
C's
right. Yes,
before now you
exactly. All these
convince, communicate.
exactly. But that's exactly what it has become. And then the other C is cancel culture. There you go.
Oh my
Because
God, lots of C's. And that's the worst of it all. That is the worst of it all. It really does. It mutes people. It leaves no room for anyone to hear another side.
but they claim it does. But people claim it does. They claim that 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 people are stating facts and that you should be convinced that the facts are the facts. So, you know, whatever you're thinking, you're misguided. You're misguided.
Right.
And that's where we didn't have that. In years ago, it was, I disagree with you.
Yeah.
And it was okay. It was okay to disagree. Today, it's not okay to disagree. And again, it goes back to the college situation that they can say, we are so open and inclusive, and we're so, accepting of everyone and everything. Well, no, there are things and people they're not accepting now, because you're gone from one extreme to the other extreme, and there will be people left out.
Yes. And one thing with cancel culture is it doesn't give you the ability to change your mind. Part of open conversation and discussion and dialogue is the ability to maybe then see, another aspect of the situation that you hadn't seen before, and maybe evolve your position on it. I have different views in my late 40s now than I did in my late 20s or when I was a teenager. So, but I've been given the opportunity to continue with having fluid conversation and to be able to listen and absorb and learn, and then continue changing my mind as it goes. But the cancel culture then just puts a cap on that and tightens the cap and shuts it down, and you're done.
and
And
as and that's it. And as a parent, you don't want to send your child into a
right.
situation that's going to stifle them or stifle their spirit. I always say, don't crush a child's spirit. They're first evolving themselves. They're first taking in all the information and then
Yeah,
sorting it out. That is what a healthy mindset is.
true. Very
Be,
true.
be open to everything and take it in, and then learn what to filter out.
Yes. And
That
you
is,
also, the environment also it's like an oxygenation to a small little flame. If the environment is going to continue to fuel only one narrative, you're really putting yourself again in a position where you may have like-minded people, but without the other contrarian side of things to balance things out, you're now creating a very large, fueled environment that is unrealistic at times, or just, detrimental actually to your future, to the current situation. But you know what? We talked about niche, NICHE, which is a good place that people can go to rank colleges, see some attributes about colleges. I think they also have like a little button on the side where you can choose liberal, conservative, and then there might be one or two other options, which, that tool should be expanded out further. So maybe people can try and get a better social match
to do
to
that.
the
Also, College
colleges.
Board, yeah, and they've also
Good.
now, just to say, Common App also and other applications have also expanded just choosing male and female. Just interesting in the last year.
What are the options now? And that's another transparency thing. How many of which are we competing against? Is it more preferable if I say a different gender? Nobody's going to look under things.
This year, when I sat with my seniors from this year, I sit with them during the application process, and I there wasn't one, not even one, that when we did the drop down box, not one of them just put in what they were. Every one of them says there are more than one choice, or would I get a better chance of getting a better scholarship if I check another one?
It's a good question.
Or um if I say prefer not to answer or other, do I have to qualify that? I mean, I got from every single student, everyone made a comment about that, you
Mhm.
know, and I will tell you, and in that grouping, in the grouping, I will tell you, I've worked with, my senior year this year, one gay, one lesbian, and one who is actually post-op transgender.
Mhm.
And it was interesting of, again, the responses on even from them saying that, oh, wow, we didn't even know that there'd be any other choices.
Yeah.
They were even surprised. So I'm just trying to, give you a flavor coming right firsthand from of how things have been shifted, and doing it like that.
Yeah.
There's also just
Definitely.
one other thing on that note. When I go through scholarships and filling out different things for scholarships, we came across there was filling out information if you're being raised by two mothers or two fathers.
Wait, that was on a college application?
No, it was on a scholarship application for a
Oh, a
certain
scholarship
college.
application. I'm sorry.
Scholarship.
Okay. So that was a criteria, or that was like
Yeah,
the heading of, okay. You know what, that scholarships definitely, like there are scholarships that are given for certain very, very,
absolutely. But I'm just
specific
showing that
groups.
of how
So
much there's
more power to
diversity.
them. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, they are putting it out there as more and being available out there. So again, there's nothing wrong with more availability of it. It's don't then, like I said, but just don't stifle or take away from other. I'm very much for equity. For things to be raised and paralleled to make it more equal and more opportunity and things like that. No
Definitely.
question. But they also don't quash people who are qualified because of certain different boxes that may or may not be checked off, or not knowing the right ones to put forth. And that
Right.
is going to happen. It's just going to be a byproduct.
And I know that you've said this to us before, and be truthful to who you are, never fabricate, don't check off the other boxes if that doesn't apply to you,
No,
just
no,
to work the system. You know,
absolutely.
when you get in trouble with college admissions, is like the celebrities just did, they paid off college admissions people. And I mean, that was
Wow.
interesting when you have money and power, and you have someone there that's able to be the middleman and facilitate wrongdoings.
Right.
It
And
goes
that has
on.
also impacted a lot of things. It impacted, again, when I came on the scene, it was very funny because I had one person say something like they were joking, but said to me something about with Lori Loughlin, whatever. They said you don't know the guy from with that worked with Lori Loughlin. I said, believe me, I said my rates are definitely a lot lower than that. No, not even close. No, but people try to do those things, and it's so counterproductive. It hurts your child. It hurts your child. I don't know why they would even go that route.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
daughter,
But
the daughters,
you see it happening even before that incident. You see people coming out of
absolutely,
Ivy Leagues that have no right ever having been in there, but their family donated a wing or a library. So,
absolutely.
and like the guy who originally was part of the scandal, there was a Netflix show about it just recently,
Okay,
related to the Lori Loughlin
okay,
whatever scandal. Um, he had explained it to all his clients. There's a front door you can contribute to, and have a building built with your name on. That's the front door to getting your kid into a college that they don't deserve. There's a side door, and then there's the back
back,
door. And he went on to describe what the others were. And I think he was using the side door or the back door. I don't know.
back door.
But the front door has certainly been used and probably still
Oh,
continues to be
absolutely.
used, where people are taking up seats that don't deserve to be there, but it's financially funding the system.
That's the reality, to it. And that's why, like I said, and it, most people don't have that ability. And you know what? And I cannot disagree with it more. And I would even say to a parent that would donate, say, $10 million for a building just for the child to go to a school, I keep going back to my initial claim. What is in the best interest for the needs, interests, and abilities of your child? Is this really the best place? And if it is, then they can probably get in without your $10 million donation. So
Yeah.
why would you want your own child in a place that they're going to be miserable in, or that they have to struggle in, that they don't feel a part of?
Mhm.
It's 4 years of a connection. You want them to have the best experience of their life. That's why taking into consideration what they're capable of, how they achieve, and who they are. Those are the components that really need to be considered. I don't do plug and play. I refuse to do that, where you plug it in, the GPA and SAT, ACT, into one place, and then it brings you back all these schools that you'll be eligible for. I then look at it, yes, I look at it, but then I look at it and I say, okay, yeah, fine, nice. However, this one would be good for you. This one wouldn't be good for you. This is why, this is why, this is why. I mean, you've worked with me. I mean, the same thing. Specifically for Ben, would, explain why each place and what it offered him, what he could bring to it.
Mhm.
And that's such a better fit for what the student is looking for. It may not always be what the parent is looking for. The agenda has to line up, though, because it's a combination of what the parent wants and the child needs.
Yep. And if I can honestly say, some of the things that you did speak to us about in those sessions, it was like a little surprising. Like he's not going to get into what he shouldn't apply to, but you were right. I will say you were right. And for people who are just starting out, hopefully they got some good information out of our whole session. Start early, start young, document things, have a folder right from the get, like 6th grade, 7th grade, start having your folder, start there. It's never too, but you know what we didn't talk about yet? And I'm sorry if you have to run. Do you have to run?
I got time for you.
Okay. What about people that A, can't afford college, B, don't even think college is for them? We're all striving towards this one goal of getting into the 4-year university that's going to give us the career of our choice so we can all achieve financial freedom in the future to go and enjoy our lives, or do something that really brings us passion in our everyday. But what about the kids that you may meet where you say to them, I don't think college should be your path. It's going to drain you of, anywhere from $100,000 to $250,000, and maybe you should explore X, Y, and Z. What are those X, Y, and Zs nowadays?
Okay. So, again, I have two current situations of what you described, so I can tell you what my response was for both of them. So one was a financial situation, but the student actually really had the capability, was an average student. But definitely, I believed, after meeting with them and asking my questions and going through, my screenings and assessments with them, I felt that they would thrive at a 4-year college. And so I actually made the suggestion that if the student became emancipated at 18, at that point, um, the downside was the parents couldn't deduct them on their taxes any longer. However, if they were emancipated and they didn't have income, their FAFSA form or whatever, they could get full scholarship or close to it in whether it be some grants, some scholarships, and some aid. And going to a state school. So it would keep the cost extremely low, going to the state school, but they would also be able to get funding for the education, and they're opting to do that. Another student,
Wait. What's the downside of being emancipated? Because
that the parents cannot deduct them on their taxes, and if they're emancipated, health insurance wise, there is some caveat with some of the insurance companies that you usually can keep your students on until 26 and things like that. They would then have to go on their own Obamacare or whatever type of health. It was the health situation, insurance, and the taxes.
Okay.
Okay, so those are the two. Um, I don't see it. it wasn't for me to make the decision. I was just giving the,
Yeah, no, I didn't even
information.
know that, I mean, I probably did know at some point, but that's an interesting opportunity that people might want to think about for
And
sure.
then the other thing was, I have a student who is extremely bright, no question. The parents insisting the student goes to a four-year college and whatever. The middle child of three, oldest is actually in a PhD program right now himself. Went undergraduate to a very fine university, and sees the same for this youngster. And there is no way that this youngster, for social reasons, anxiety reasons, and other things, even though very bright, um, I wouldn't even suggest at this point a community college for them. I believe that they would thrive better in having training, other training. So I actually connected and them to actually in their county vocational, training program,
Mhm.
to speak with counselors there of what training free of charge that they can get to actually learn a trade in some way, and to see what would be interesting. And right now they're considering between a pastry chef, believe it or not, a pastry chef, and also cosmetology. So they have been shown that they can make very good livings, very good living with these elements as well. Again, the parents are not happy, but I will say that they understood. I said, it's not a done deal. They can go for this type of training, but maybe in time will feel that they themselves are motivated to go back to a college situation and want more for themselves and whatever. They are just not socially prepared to do what they're would need to do for a four-year college. They would absolutely not succeed. No
Yeah.
question.
That's good. That's great advice. What sort of trades are there beyond the original mechanic, electrician, plumber? You just mentioned pastry chef, cosmetologist, like also hair. Is that a
Right.
cosmetologist? Does that include
It's
hair?
it's separate. It's separate,
Okay.
actually. They're
So,
separate. They're separate certifications. In addition, I also, in the past couple of years, had another youngster go to sonography school to become a
what
sonographer.
stenographer?
No, not stenographer, a sonographer, for sonograms, to do a
Oh,
sonographer. Yeah.
okay. So like
And
it's
also court
tech,
stenography is something else. Yes.
quick stenographer and
Court
stenographer.
stenography, yes, but a lot of times, believe it or not, court stenographers lately, a lot of them do go to college, at least two-year colleges, to do court stenography, because again, they have to know certain things in the language, and
Yeah.
it's not as vocational based as it was in court stenography. But being a sono technician, anything in radiology,
Mm-hmm.
um, there are 18-month programs, medical assistant. There
Mm-hmm.
are other vocations that you can make a living, support yourself, enjoy, that do not have to be academically college based. I've recommended many of them.
Yeah, that's great. And there's also Salesforce certification in on the technology side of things. You can be
Right, and
Microsoft
we discussed that.
certified.
But a lot of times they do want, with the Salesforce and all of that, they today's day and age, for having the certifications without at least an associate's, honestly,
Hmm.
they're not as valuable. They're not.
Okay.
They do look for a bachelor's degree mostly, and at the minimum of an associate's with the Salesforce certificates on top of it.
Got it. I know one of my son's friends is actually going to be living up at Penn State, but he is taking online courses elsewhere. He is
Mhm.
not going to be a Penn State student, but he is going to enjoy the life of a Penn State student, which is great. He's not going to be living in the dorms. He's just going to be living, off campus
State college.
in town. So you could still get that college experience in the town that you want, even in the college
Absolutely.
town, as close in proximity to the university, and still take courses online elsewhere. And I know colleges and even high schools are continuing to bulk up their online availability, even after the pandemic, of courses. So
Yes.
that's another way to keep the costs down and still enjoy, the college life in that sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No
Yeah.
question.
Well, this was great. Thank you
Yeah.
for taking the time. I know it took us a little while to carve
Absolutely.
out, and I hope everyone's okay on your side. And
Yes, yes, thank you for asking, getting there, so thank you. Yes,
good.
absolutely. And there, if any other questions, whatever else like that, let me know.
Okay. And do you want to mention your contact
Yes,
information or you
sure. I mean,
just
sure. As I said, my name, I'm saying, yes, it's Karin-Jill Schneider. My phone number is 732-308-2266. And by email, if you like my email, it's it's PSYCH 28 at AOL.com. And if you have any questions or anything I can assist you with, reach out.
well, thank you so much. And I think people should start reaching out to you when their kids are as early as 6th or 7th grade so they can start getting that routine and getting into things just to make them be successful humans. Because then now at my age, I'm like, oh, I wish I had done more time management. And, like I'm so chaotic and all over the place. But, when you learn good habits early, they tend to stay with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, templating is best as far as that goes. And again, about forming a habit, 21 days, to get into a habit formation, 30 days sometimes to get rid of a habit, but you can always, make it happen. It can always happen.
Excellent. Well, thank you and good luck with everyone's future out there.
Absolutely.
It's a fun
Absolutely.
place. And we're constantly learning every day on how to work the system and, create the best environment for ourselves. So keep playing the game.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Talk
Thank
again.
you.